great, and it's beautiful. But I love the whole.
Good.
Anyways, we will share at some point.
Yes.
Hey, did everybody sign a card that wanted to? Birthday card? No. Okay.
Yes, when the weather changes.
Okay. I forgot a pen.
Almost a month ago.
Candy, you have a pen? I forgot.
Yes, I do. I will do it today, 4 of them.
She's taking me outside. I'll tell you when I come back. Good morning. Good morning. No, and
I'll give you my good one.
Well, he's coming back inside. Good morning.
Nice. Well, how was the bar mitzvah this week? Was it great?
So much fun to be the grandparents. There's no pressure, you just go and
My grandson, July.
I mean, 6 months ago, really? Everyone his daughter-in-law on the dance floor all night.
I have to tell you, as the usher, as sort of the bar mitzvah family, sort of. I can tell you.
Like you are.
Oh, good.
See?
My daughter's it's her second.
Association.
You used to say,
And she's I'm sure it'll be good. I'm sure it'll be good. Kids do things so differently than we do. Good for them, that's all I have to say. Yeah, I know, I'm not. We have lunch after the 11 o'clock thing, you know, at a was in a hotel. And then we had a kids party, we had to have a kids party. And because I was not celebrating, it was hard for me to do that. She insisted, you know, she bought me all the clothes that I had to wear, and I didn't have any choice. I got to choose one of the twin sister was also. Right. But it was, that's the important part. It was, and like, no, it was in Temple-Tifereth Israel in Buffalo. And they, no, I'm not in, I didn't realize that.
Testing 1, 2.
you remember Rabbi?
Yes, I know of him. I don't remember.
A lot of
Signed this, didn't you?
Do you know Naomi? That's Chase. Good morning. When we're in 7th, 6th, and 7th grade, it's like, oh, who knows? Anyway. This is my.
Nobody wants
We worked a lot, and I was
Well enough to read from the Torah? From a book.
You did it. I did it.
Right. Being there made it in a restaurant.
No, I've got it.
Well, you have to learn to learn. And then you have to, even have to write a speech. At the temple. Today they have to write a Right. Oh, let me show you this. That's a grandparent.
Okay, you guys want to sign it?
Yes. It's nice to go buy a new dress. Right. I know. Yeah, my kid, my daughter and my granddaughter.
Here, I think you got your sign, right? It's in the, and now?
You've been away.
Yes, that's exactly what he said.
You want to sign for them? Pardon? Anywhere you want. See if everybody else can.
Yeah.
Regina.
Oh, okay.
This is the head of the gate, which is
As far as you want.
Shortcut.
Egypt may drag other importations into full war by France. So, make it your own.
Well, I'm gonna give them the card. Okay, afterwards we'll do that, and then take a picture of that case. Well,
Tomorrow? No, I think that's Good morning, everybody. Shabbat Shalom. Nice to see you. Hi, good to see you, Jeff. Hope everybody is well. We have the looks of a beautiful spring day with all kinds of wind and the chaos that it has created. I don't know whether you have felt it. I certainly have. Okay, so a couple of preliminaries. There is going to be a sheet passed around. We have a few blank spots in our, let's call it, Bagel Plus enterprise. A few streamings and bagels dates are still open, so if you have a mind to fill it in, you'll see on the left what is needed for each of the dates. There are only 3 or 4 of them, but it'd be nice to fill them in. Thank you to those who have participated in this, I'm calling it an enterprise. Joan and Bob Lustig sponsored streaming this morning. Thank you so very much. And Candy picked up the bagels. Thank you so much. And the Torah Study Fund is taking care of the bagels payment itself. So as you remember, we did not have live streaming last week, and I heard from several people about it. It's nice to know that people are counting on it, and every now and then, it's the paradox of technology. I think as an example of it, the power windows in our cars. If it works, it's amazing. If it doesn't, we suffocate. So there's the paradox of modernity, and 2 steps forward and possibly 1.5 steps backwards. So welcome to live streamers. Sorry about last week. I know that it's online. It's on our website if you want to go back and pick it up. We would like to have you do that. Blessing for our Torah study. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. We praise you, Lord, our God, sovereign of the universe, who sanctifies us through God's commandments and joining upon us the obligation to immerse ourselves in words of Torah. Amen. Okay.
Rabbi,
I see a couple of people who are relatively new here this morning, so I just want to reiterate, everybody's comment is welcome. We are not in the business of presenting to one another fully polished and foolproof opinions. Otherwise, I would just call for silent prayer, and we'd stop at 11:15 and we'd go home. So part of the opportunity of doing this is to be able to explore, to try things out. If you're like me, I often don't know what I have to say until I say it. And after I've said it, I'm a little bit abashed by how unprepared I was to say it. You know, it's not as if nothing came out right, but I come to see through the comment, and it rings in my ears and in my heart a long time after. And it gives me an opportunity to, having objectified the comment, to then assess it and see the way in which I could have said it better. So we want to engage in the spirit of attempting to understand, and the best way to do that is to participate and then to see how it is. We all recognize that none of us has the truth, and so we're just taking a stab at it. Okay. Jim.
You've given me a very good segue. I appreciate it. I think you planned it.
Oh, boy.
Well, since we all have something to say, we want to remember your birthday.
Oh, you're nice.
And our poet laureate, Flo Friedman, has come up with something extraordinary.
Thank you so much. Look at this. Thank you. Good golly. I take back all the bad things I said about all of you. Never mind. Thanks so much. Flo. Oh, boy.
Okay. A little poem.
Thank you.
Maybe it's a rhyme. I'm not profound like Emily Dickinson, but it's
Who
cute.
is?
Okay.
Slow down.
Go to the,
Here, go to-
talking to the mic.
Do I
Look
have
at
to?
that. Oh, my gosh.
Okay. Dear Rabbi Roger, April 17th, 1942 was the day you were born. That makes you 82. Thus today in Torah Study we're going to celebrate you. You're bright, intelligent, blessed with talents quite amazing. Let's take the time to mention some because they are worth praising. A lover of sports like tennis and baseball, we heard you were quite a pitcher. So good you were asked to throw the first pitch, making Cleveland richer. An expert in art, music, and even the solar eclipse. On so many subjects you can speak, your listeners you do transfix. With Bible and Torah, you're certainly a genius. Explaining all the meanings, absolutely, you have no weakness. And on these topics, serious as they are, you inject your sense of humor, making Torah Study the best by far. Now we have to comment on your kindness, warmth, wisdom, and caring with your congregation. You never seem to mind sharing. May you have many years of good luck and good health to lead us in Torah that's worth more than wealth. Happy birthday, with love and with warmth and love from your students of Torah Study. Okay, and it's all decorated with,
Yes, it is.
with the rabbi's interest. So,
Baseballs, tennis balls, Torah scroll, music. See if I can figure out who the composer is.
yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, now we'd like you to step over here so we can do the traditional birthday song. Blow out the candles and then get on with the Torah study. And everyone is invited to come on over and have a piece of cake now or anytime.
Okay, whenever. I'm I'm still nervous.
That is lovely. Yes, lovely, and you looked beautiful.
Oh my gosh, you're so sweet.
I'm gonna say something. Oh my goodness. You're overwhelming me. Well, gosh, thank you so much. I mean, I'm really extremely touched about this, but I also have to add that whatever success I've had is in large part because of all of you who support what I do and participate in our conversations, whether they're communal or one-on-one. I talk to many colleagues, have talked to many colleagues over the years who say, you know, you really can't be friends with your congregants because you're the leader and you have to, in a way, remain personally remote in order to lead. And I've said to them, you just don't know what it is to be a rabbi in a congregation where people are also your friends, care about you, and recognize your weaknesses as well as your possible strengths. And so, you are my blessing. You are ours. So, thanks for being you. Let's have some cake.
Okay, well, I can't look, and then I'll cut it off.
Don't forget, I'm 82. Yeah. You ready to help me?
Keep thinking straight.
Thank you for helping.
Definitely.
You know, if I'm still here when I'm 96, you're going to regret it. Well, because I'll be here, I'll be on the way.
Oh, I thought you said before.
did all that. They came back.
Oh, yeah, I know.
Women's fashion.
Hey, Flo.
Yeah, really lovely. Yeah, I bet. We have to get together. Now that the weather,
So, it's something that love who you love. Some people I have a tank of dead hissing cockroaches. Hissing cockroaches. Yeah, they're hissing. I gotta guess. There's the clean and safe that one flavor I have in my store. I keep little snakes at home that I had this year. So they've done studies. They've done studies with primate brains. They bring the they show the pictures.
yes.
Gorilla, chimpanzee.
I know, I never drank coffee until I went to Vermont. And I went to the coffee.
And I trip a snake.
And it's very fun. That's
Close. 20 years out. Okay, folks, let's, I hate to interrupt conversations, but maybe we'll do a little Torah. And a couple of people have said during this period how nice it is for everybody to have a chance to talk together. So I think that's a bonus for us as well. So thank you doesn't accomplish it, but I really am very touched. So I think we did the blessing for Torah, didn't we? Still a little disoriented. Okay, so we're working on the question of biblical leadership, and we've been spending the last couple of weeks on prophets and primarily on Moses. And we've over the years, we've done Moses many times, not as in such a focused way as we are now, But of course, you can't study the Torah, the Chumash, without contending with Moses once we get to Moses at the beginning of Exodus. But I must say, I don't know whether you agree, that this focus on Moses the last couple of weeks has really highlighted for me just how complex an issue prophecy is. And I think both the glory and the pathos of this office points out just what it is to be or think of yourself or hope for yourself that you are mediating between two powerful realities. Let me just put it this way. The truth and people's need for it, while you're also dealing with the complexities of being a human being and how we both aspire to the truth and we resist it because knowing the truth creates a burden. And of course, the whole issue of truth is a very vexed one too, isn't it? How do we know what the truth is? And if we think we have it, how do we deal with it, especially in the presence of others who may not agree with our truth? So the issue of prophecy, and certainly its structure, that is, the structure of prophecy is, I guess I'm just going to say it this way again. There are truths in our world, and they're worth striving to embrace, or the truth shall make you free. If we know the truth, there is a freedom to it. And I might say, even if we get close to it, if we feel that we have some truths, we have to be humble about it, recognize that our truths are not everybody's, but to feel that you've touched eternity, I don't know exactly how to say it. And I think those of us who love music and poetry recognize that from time to time we really do touch the timeless. I was at, a couple of you were at the recital, the leader recital the other night.
Fantastic.
I'm sorry?
Fantastic.
The Schumann song cycle and a couple of the Schubert, I mean, you really feel that these guys and gals touch something transcendent. So what I love about dealing with Moses here is that he both has a vocation and he moves toward it, but he also moves away from it because it is a privilege and a burden at the same time. So I'm entertaining, talking about speaking out loud, just to see what it sounds like as it resonates in us. I'm entertaining the idea that the Bible's preeminent leader is the prophet, for better or for worse. And it's hard to be a prophet, but it's also an exalted role. So I want to go back. Moses is called as Jeremiah is called, and they both take the call seriously. They both accept it as real, and they embark on that vocation and find themselves touching eternity, but also being extremely vulnerable in and through their vocation. So let's keep those ideas in mind as we continue with Moses for a little while longer. So I do want to go back to the Jeremiah passage, because I think that in a way Jeremiah expresses it with a power that is unmatched in biblical literature. So let's go back to two things here. The very first chapter of Jeremiah, this is by way of review, but as as I was thinking about today, I thought, it's worth going back and allowing this to ring in our minds and our souls a little bit. So Jeremiah, somebody have Jeremiah 1 page?
763.
763. The words of Jeremiah, the son of Hilkiah, one of the priests of Anatot in the territory of Benjamin. The word of the Lord came to him in the days of King Josiah, the son of Ammon of Judah, in the 13th year of his reign. And throughout the days of King Jehoiakim, the son of Josiah of Judah, until the end of the 11th year of King Zedekiah, the son of Josiah of Judah, when Jerusalem went into exile in the 5th month. Boy, that covers a lot of territory, doesn't it? So the 13th year of King Josiah is 627 before the Common Era. Deuteronomy, at least according to the book of Jeremiah, is it Jeremiah? No, it's 2 Kings, indicates that in the year 622, they discovered a scroll in the temple, and Josiah reads from it on a holiday, and scholars have felt that that passage has deep similarities with Deuteronomy itself. And so the speculation is that Deuteronomy, or let's call it Proto-Deuteronomy, the beginnings of the book of Deuteronomy, were discovered 5 years after Jeremiah's prophecy begins, 627 and 622. And scholars do believe that Jeremiah had something to do with the creation of the book of Deuteronomy. So Jeremiah is a consequential figure, and 627 plus 40 years brings us to 587, which is the date of the first exile of the people to Babylonia. So Jeremiah prophesizes in the tumultuous last 40 years of the kingdom of Judah, which began with King David in the year 1000. So this is hundreds and hundreds of years later, and it's the end of an era. Okay? And in these first verses, we get the names of kings. Josiah is one of 3 or 4 or 5 of all the kings of north and south who are praised. All the rest of them do very, very badly. But King Josiah is one of the giants. And the language about Josiah is reminiscent of some of the language about Moses, so that Josiah can also be seen as a kind of Moses figure. Okay, so we're going on now. The word of the Lord came to me. Before I created you in the womb, I selected you. Okay, this is another way of talking about vocation, which comes from the word to be called. Okay, so this is a dramatic way of saying that Jeremiah didn't go to college and major in prophecy, and then he went to graduate school in prophecy and got his advanced degree and became a prophet. He's a prophet because God called him. And if God calls you, you are destined to do this, although I suppose it's possible to wiggle your way out. But if you take it seriously, this is your destiny. The existentialists, in terms of the issue of essence and existence, on the question, what are we? And there are 2 ways of talking about that. We are what we essentially are, and our essence precedes our existence. Aristotle. Human beings are rational animals. That's a definition of what it means to be human that is true about us even before we're born. We are born with the capacity for rationality, which is already something. A capacity may be mere potential, but that potential is a kind of actuality, which was given to us before we were born. So if I ask myself, who am I? Aristotle would say, we know very well what you are. You're a rational animal. You belong to the animal kingdom. You have a body, you're mortal, and so on. But you have a specific difference between yourselves and all the other animals in that we can think. That's what makes us different. And the Aristotelian kind of definition is species plus differentia. What basic category do we exist in? Animal. But what's our specific difference from all other animals? Rational capacity. And this tells us what our vocation as individuals is. To bring to the highest realization our specific difference. And so a life of cultivating reason is our vocation. And if we live that vocation, we are being ourselves. And for Aristotle, there are at least two kinds of reason, practical and theoretical, ethics and knowledge. So for Aristotle, essence precedes existence. You see that? For the existentialists, it's the other way around. I have no essence. I make who I am. Existence precedes essence. And essence is something arrived at through effort, not what I am before I ever make an effort. The Bible here for Jeremiah is Aristotelian. I mean, no biblical author would like that attribution, but it's the same idea. Jeremiah's essence, his vocation, what he is meant to do, is already given to him before he takes his first breath. And he can either live it out or avoid it. And if he avoids it, he is really undermining what it was he was meant to be. And if he acknowledges that this is what he is meant to do, he tries to do the best at it that he can, which is what Jeremiah did. Under all kinds of assault, as we looked at it last week or a couple of weeks ago. So I think this notion of vocation, it's the same for Moses. For Jeremiah, it's his vocation before he was born. He was born into being a prophet. Moses wasn't born to it, but at a certain crucial moment, when God called Moses and said, I'm choosing you, that transforms Moses' life. And now his choice is to live it out or to resist it. And he tries to resist it, doesn't he? On a variety of occasions, which I think is so great about Moses, because he asks all the right questions about being a prophet. Who am I to take on this massive endeavor? And by the way, when I go to the people and say I'm sent by God, they're going to say, who is this God? Which is what we would say. We don't see God. We don't hear God. How am I supposed to know whether this wasn't just some dream you made up? That's a big question for anybody who thinks that they're disseminating something true. You may feel it powerfully, but how are you going to communicate that to others who may not be predisposed to get it? Who are the people? I could convince them that it's really God who called me, but maybe they don't want this burden, right? And the vocation of the prophet is to speak. And I don't speak very well. So Moses gets to all the challenges of being a prophet, and they're formidable, aren't they? And he continues to wrestle with them. So let's go back to Jeremiah, who I think is a paradigm example of what we're talking about. The word of the Lord came to me, verse 5, before I created you in the womb, I selected you. Before you were born, I consecrated you. And I appointed you a prophet concerning the nations. Let me read those 3 lines again in a more polemical way. Before I created you in the womb, I selected you. Well, I don't believe that. You can tell me that, but I don't feel the power of that. All right, let me try it again. Before you were born, I consecrated you. See, I'm trying to make this into a kind of conversation. God says to Jeremiah, no, you're my guy. Well, I don't know. I don't know. Let me try it again. It's not just that I selected you, I also consecrated you. You're raising the stakes. I'm not sure about this. I appointed you a prophet concerning the nations. If you really want to know why I selected you and consecrated you, this just wasn't for you so that you could feel like a big shot. I'm calling you to be a servant and to bring my message to and about the nations. And I replied, Lord God. We hear Moses here, don't we? Lord God, I don't know how to speak, for I'm still a boy. And the Lord said to me, with some frustration. Right? I'm trying to get you to feel the power of your vocation, and you're telling me I'm just a boy. Don't say I'm still a boy. For wherever I send you, but go wherever I send you, and speak whatever I command you. Have no fear of them, for I am with you to deliver you, declares the Lord. And it turns out that in some real sense, God doesn't deliver Jeremiah. He's thrown in jail, and he languishes there for a while. So in what sense is it true that I am with you to deliver you? How about this for an answer? Jeremiah, for all the non-deliverance by God during his lifetime, delivered Jeremiah to us as a model for what prophets are and what they should or do mean to us. So, verse 9, the Lord put out his hand and touched my mouth. And of course, Moses' final demur, I don't know how to speak. Don't worry about it. I'm consecrating your mouth. Remember, he says that to Isaiah too, in Isaiah's consecration moment. And the Lord said to me, herewith I put my words into your mouth. And here's your message. I appoint you this day over nations and kingdoms, to uproot and to pull down, to destroy and to overthrow, to build and to plant. What a vocation. 2 parts, critique, and 1 part construction. To uproot and to pull down, to destroy and to overthrow, to build and to plant. Now, if I'm Jeremiah, I say at this point, that's a lot of negativity. You're asking me to announce to the people. My guess is they're not going to be happy when I tell them this. So you're really setting me up for a lot of difficulty. Don't worry about it. I'm with you. Okay, I guess so. And also, I've called you to build and to plant. So, yes, there is construction, but much of it is rebuke, destruction, to tear down, the corruptions of society. If I'm Jeremiah at this moment, I'm looking for the whiskey. Isn't that true? I mean, wow, what is happening to my life here? But his life is consecrated to God, and he takes that very seriously, although there are troubles. And speaking of which, let's move to chapter 20. We looked at this, but I think it's worth looking again. Chapter 20. Pashur, the son of Immer, the priest who was chief officer of the house of the Lord, heard Jeremiah prophesy these things. Pashur thereupon had Jeremiah flogged and put in the cell at the upper Benjamin gate in the house of the Lord. The next, sedition. I mean, that's what this is, sedition. This is a critique of the reigning powers of the realm. Okay? And we have that same question today, don't we? Let's just talk about Israel. There are two objects of possible critique. Israel itself as something corrupt from the start. The whole enterprise is corrupt. The other is the particular rulers of the day. And I think, I don't know about you, for me, the latter critique is wholly valid. The former is deeply problematic. So what is Jeremiah railing against? Is he railing against the whole enterprise begun by Moses, or just its current manifestation? The corruption of its current, and I suggest that it's the latter and not the former. That he's not calling into question the entire enterprise, but just its current embodiment. But when you criticize the current government, you're in for a lot of being rebuked, aren't you? As we see today. Because it's very easy to say, if you're opposed to Netanyahu and Netanyahu's government, you really are opposed to Israel itself and don't see the value of its existence. And that kind of claim is often made, especially by those who don't want any criticism at all. So the dynamic continues. But Jeremiah said to him, I'm in the middle of verse 3, the Lord has named you not Pashur, but Magor Misaviv, terror all around is what that means. For thus said the Lord, I'm going to deliver you and all your friends over to terror. They will fall by the sword of their enemies while you look on. I will deliver all Judah into the hands of the king of Babylon. I mean, imagine the audience, the government officials, hearing this from some guy, Jeremiah, who feels he has the right to say these devastating words. I will deliver all Judah into the hands of the king of Babylon. He will exile them to Babylon and put them to the sword. That seems seditious, doesn't it? As if the whole enterprise is bankrupt. And therefore, everything about it deserves to be brought low. I will deliver all the wealth, all the riches, and all the prized possessions of this city. And I will also deliver all the treasures of the kings of Judah into the hands of their enemies. They shall seize them as plunder and carry them off to Babylon. As for you, Pashur, and all who live in your house, you shall go into captivity. You shall come to Babylon. There you shall die, and there you shall be buried. And so shall all your friends to whom you prophesied falsely. Okay? So this is the climax of the words of chastisement. The prophets really have two roles. To give divrei tochachot, words of chastisement, and divrei tanchumim, words of compassion, consolation. So if we just hold on to Jeremiah for a moment and go back to Isaiah chapter 40. When you have the page, call it out.
698.
698. It's not for nothing that chapter 40 begins what scholars call the second Isaiah, because its mood is very different from chapters 1 through 39. Chapters 1 through 39 are words of chastisement before the exile. Starting with 40, we have words of comfort, of consolation from an author known as Isaiah of the Exile. whoever he may have been, okay? So if you look at 1 through 39, and we could just look at chapter 1 as an example, we can see that the mood changes here. Comfort, O comfort my people, says your God. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem and declare to her, notice Jerusalem is being personified, as it were a mother who had lost her children when they went into exile. And now that mother is going to be able to rejoice in the return of her children. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem. You see the personification there? You don't speak tenderly to an object, to an inert object. It's a suggestion that Jerusalem has ears to hear and a heart to feel. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem and declare to her that her term of service is over. She's being let out of her prison. That her iniquity is expiated, for she has received at the hand of the Lord double for all her sins. She has been punished along with the people who went into exile, and her term of punishment is now over, and we can now comfort her. So this is a good example of the second aspect of prophetic utterance, words of consolation. This is a great example of it. Whereas what Jeremiah is delivering are words of chastisement, another thing that the prophets often do. Okay? And we're back to Jeremiah 20. As for you, Pashur, and all who live in your house, you shall go into captivity. You shall come to Babylon. There you shall die, and there you shall be buried. And so shall all your friends to whom you prophesied falsely. And then Jeremiah, having done this extremely courageous thing for which he was punished, now, I love what is happening here. The author now turns to, how does it feel to be Jeremiah? Not just what does it mean for Jeremiah to fulfill his vocation, to tear down and to destroy, as he's doing in the first verses, but what does it feel? So when he goes to Pashur, he's striking a pose of boldness, of confidence. I'm speaking for God, and I'm telling you that your time is over and you're going into exile. And I'm not equivocating. I'm not saying, it seems to me that you may have another opinion, Pashur, but it does seem to me that time is over for you. No, he's unequivocal and forceful. But then when he retreats, how does it feel to have done this? Now, I love Jeremiah, we know as we call the weeping prophet. He's the one who feels very, very deeply. And he, in a way, has to put his feelings aside in order to make his bold statements. So, this is both biographical and autobiographical. The author reaches into the heart of Jeremiah. You in verse 7, you enticed me, O Lord, and I was enticed. You overpowered me, and you prevailed. This is back to his call in chapter 1. You told me this is who I am, and I'm going to have to accept it, and I did. But it felt like you were overpowering me. I have become a constant laughingstock. Everyone jeers at me. For every time I speak, I must cry out, must shout, lawlessness and repine. For the word of the Lord causes me constant disgrace and contempt. I thought, no, I won't mention him. No more will I speak in his name. But his word was like a raging fire in my heart, shut up in my bones. I couldn't help it. I knew it wasn't good for me, but such is the reality of being called. You just have to do it. There is a kind of, that's what we mean by destiny. There's a kind of determinism about one's life. Jeremiah could go out from time to time. We don't want to say that he didn't, He could go out from time to time and play catch. Couldn't he? And then he would say, I have an appointment with Pashur in an hour and a half, and I better go in and get a shower and get into some fresh clothes. I mean, let's hope Jeremiah had some fun. I was sitting by the bedside some years ago of a person I knew very, very well who was very near death. And he said to me, the problem in my life was I never had any fun. Well, this is a person who made a huge difference in his life to others and to our community. It's not as if he didn't do things that gratified him. But I think he felt, I was always about my vocation, always about my work. And even growing up, we never had fun. And I won't forget that. That was a very poignant moment by a very formidable individual. This was not an individual who did nothing with his life. And one has to think about Jeremiah here. Did this guy ever laugh? I thought, verse 9, I will not mention him, no more will I speak in his name. But his word was like a raging fire in my heart, shut up in my bones. I could not hold it in. I was helpless. I heard the whispers of the crowd, terror all around. Let us inform against him. Let's tell the authorities what he's saying. All my supposed friends are waiting for me to stumble. Perhaps he can be entrapped, and we can prevail against him. Notice he's quoting them. This is not a direct quote of them, but what he feels they are saying about him. Perhaps it can be entrapped, and we can prevail against him and take our vengeance on him. But the Lord is with me like a mighty warrior. Therefore my persecutors shall stumble. Isn't that great? That Jeremiah is suffering and wonders, what am I doing here? My life is turned upside down because I'm serving God. But also I have faith that my persecutors shall stumble. This combination of despair and determination. This guy Jeremiah is really a formidable person, isn't he? A very complex person. They shall not prevail, and they shall not, therefore, going back, my persecutors shall stumble. They shall not prevail and shall not succeed. They shall be utterly shamed with a humiliation for all time, which shall not be forgotten. And of course, Jeremiah is right about that. We read about it right here. O Lord of hosts, you who test the righteous, who examine the heart and the mind, let me see your retribution upon them, for I lay my case before you. A very human moment, isn't it? They're assailing me. I'm under constant pressure. Wouldn't it be great to see their downfall? Now, if I had a moment at this point to go to Jeremiah, I might have said, this is awfully small of you to want the downfall of your enemies. And his response might have been, yeah, but I'm only human. And this is how I feel. It might not be the highest order feeling, but we human beings can be human from time to time. I mean, this is a deeply personal description and picture, isn't it? For I lay my case before you. Sing unto the Lord, praise the Lord, for he has rescued the needy from the hands of evildoers. Love it. Jeremiah is quoting one of the Psalms. Accursed be the day that I was... Right, so I hope my enemies suffer. But nevertheless, I think that you are going to prevail. And I'm going to sing a little psalm to you. But you know what? I still have this rage in my heart. This is not all sublime and exalted feeling. Accursed be the day that I was born. Let not the day be blessed when my mother bore me. And the day, I take it, is not just October 12th, 1981. It's every single October 12th from now on. Cursed be October 12th. I don't know that I'm right about it, but when he says, cursed be the day on which I were born, I want to infer that he would like that day to be ripped from the calendar. Accursed be the man who brought my father the news and said, a boy is born to you, and gave him such joy. Cursed be that messenger. Let that man become like the cities which the Lord overthrew without relenting. Let him hear the shrieks in the morning and battle shouts at noontime. I mean, Jeremiah at this point is going way beyond reasonableness. The messenger who brought my father good news. What a terrible thing this turned out to be. But he goes on and on about it. Enough, right? Let that man, verse 16, become like the cities which the Lord overthrew without relenting. Let him hear shrieks in the morning and battle shouts at noontime, because he didn't kill me before birth, so that my mother might be my grave, and her womb big with me for all time. Why did I ever issue from the womb? In other words, she'd be pregnant forever. So that But it wouldn't be a pregnancy with some joyous end to it. This is a corpse that she's going to be carrying forever. And the only one who would benefit from this, not the father, not the mother, not the messenger, but Jeremiah. He wouldn't have to have been born to have been told, this is your life. To see misery. Why did I ever issue from the womb? To see misery and woe, to spend all my days in shame. Don't you think that this chapter is an absolute masterpiece of psychological penetration into the complexity of being called, or even if we might broaden it, to feel that one is called to do a certain thing, to feel that one has a vocation and one's going to pursue this however it turns out because of the commitment to the value of that vocation and the ups and downs. It's not as if, Moses was called to be prophet. Yeah, there are problems, but boy, has this been great. I'm a leader of people. All right, I've had some bad days. But still, every single day, I just feel blessed that I have this vocation. That's not Jeremiah's view of vocation. The more exalted the goals, the more trouble the person has trying to pull it off. Why? Because who am I to do this? I'm too weak to do this big thing. And who are you who's calling me? How can I show the difference between I'm making this up and I was called by God? How can I show that difference? And the people are fickle. They don't get it, that they're sinning and their sins are bringing this devastation onto themselves. All the things Moses complains about come back in a moment like this to be really problematic elements of the prophetic profession, right? I mean, if God were to come out of the clouds, see, oh, there's God. And he'd tell us, this is your vocation, but that does not happen. We make an inference that this is what is happening to us, so that the prophetic vocation is extremely vulnerable, risky, filled with suffering. And yet Jeremiah in verse 13 can say, sing unto the Lord, praise the Lord, for he has rescued the needy from the hands of the evildoers. that is Promethean, isn't it? In the sense of the courage of somebody who is just going to do the right thing, whatever the suffering is. Scott?
One thing I was going to interject about the day I was born, perhaps a couple cakes might have helped. I wanted to ask a question.
Yeah, that's good.
Because he says this is going to happen. Do you think he believed that it would happen with or without his commentary, without his words, his warning?
My guess is yes, because let's think of it just in secular terms and not so much in religious terms. You remember the fifth commandment, honor your father and your mother that your days might be long on the land that the Lord your God gives you. We can understand that in two ways. If you honor your mother and your father, let's take that as doing the right thing, then you'll get a reward, right? It's like my idea of if my children bring home a report card with all A's, I raise their allowance. What's the inherent connection between getting A's and getting a raise? I've just decided that that's going to be a reward. Let's call it an extrinsic consequence to the act itself. I could understand that in the following way. If I honor my mother and my father, and all the things that emerge from that, I become a good citizen, I know how to work with others, I know what it means to honor authority. That's going to lay the foundations for a just and healthy society. The consequences in this understanding flow from the action. They don't just, I should have said to my children, your reward for getting good grades is getting more good grades. You see what it means to do well. Let that go to your head and see what's heady about doing well. There the reward flows from the action. I'm driving at something here. I think that Jeremiah might be understood as this is going to happen. I see where I was. This is going to happen anyway, because if you don't do the right thing, that is creating a just and compassionate society, the society rots from within. I could say that God is punishing you. That's a theology of historical events. But I could also understand it without the theology. A rotting society becomes weak and vulnerable. I recently read the other day a comment by Solzhenitsyn, a speech that he gave many years ago, where he said, we are worried that the West has lost its courage, that the West has lost its resolve. In a way, that's what Jeremiah is saying. You have become weak. You're not committed anymore to the ideals of your society. And therefore, society is corroding from within. And when that happens, you become vulnerable. And the Babylonians, who are in the business of expanding their empire, one doesn't have to think of them in secular terms as being God's agent. They're expanding their empire. What the prophets are doing is they're creating a theology of history, that the way history works is dependent upon human action. But there are other forces that are at work and could be understood as prevailing. So I think to Scott's question, if Jeremiah hadn't spoken, or if God, would it have happened anyway? I think the answer is yes. I mean, the same thing about Amos. Amos speaks in 750, a century plus, earlier than Jeremiah. At 720, the northern kingdom is defeated. So Amos is saying that God is going to do this. This is Amos's way of imposing a certain framework on historical events. I mean, there are many ways of understanding history, right? Through geography, through economics, through the great man theory, right? Leadership is everything. There are many ways of understanding the historical process. This is just another way. a theological way. But one can understand these events without having to impose that structure on it. Honor your father and mother, so that if you don't do that, inherently the society is going to become weak. Jeff?
So, you're saying that prophets are preaching the flow of history that others don't see. Would that make Jonah the only prophet that changed the arc of history through his speech?
How?
By going to Nineveh and changing the arc of their
Oh,
destruction.
that's a very good point. I mean, look, so Jeff is suggesting that God calls him to go to Nineveh. And Jonah's understandably upset because he knows God is a forgiving God. And if he goes and says, if you repent, God will forgive you. Well, when nothing happens, what's the cause of nothing? And so Jonah's worried about saying that this is God's doing and not doing. But if nothing happens, God is merely a hypothesis. And I think that that's what Jonah's up against. But he does get the people to repent. Changing the course of history, that's really nice. I mean, I wonder whether other prophets, the same thing. I mean, Amos says in his speech in 750 to God, relent, don't punish the people are small. And God listens to Amos. So that's another example, I think, of a prophet changing history. In Amos's time, just temporarily, because the punishment, so understood, happens. So that's an interesting point. In what ways do the prophets actually change the course of events, either temporarily or not at all? Yeah, I like that. Yeah. Okay, so Jeremiah is, when I read the Moses story of Moses being called and all of his questions, I think of Jeremiah, who really pulls out in a very powerful autobiographical way the import of Moses' concerns. Who am I? Who are you? Who are the people? I can't speak. As a sort of paradigm for the dilemmas and grandeur of being a prophet. I mean, all these guys, for all their suffering, are immortalized, aren't they? They're in the Bible. Jeremiah got his stuff in the Bible. That's no mean achievement. All right, so let's go back just for a minute and look at some other Moses things. So I want to go back to Numbers chapter 12. We've looked at this before, but I want to focus on it again just to nail down some of these important things. So one of the questions we might ask about prophets now in a more positive light, not the sufferings of the prophets, but what it is the prophets actually do. So chapter 12, Numbers. Somebody have the page?
227.
227. When they were in Hartzmark, Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of the Cushite woman he had married a Cushite woman. Okay, so they are rebuking Moses for doing this, marrying the Cushite woman. Is this another woman, or is this Zipporah? And the commentators, the wife he actually married. So they've said, has the Lord spoken only through Moses? It's a good point, isn't it? These are all good questions. I mean, Moses, we're Moses' brother and sister. And actually, we're older than Moses. Why didn't we get the call? Why don't we have the call? Maybe this is a family matter, right? Think of Bo and Josh Naylor. You know what I'm talking about? Two of the baseball players on the Guardians. Both hit home runs the other night. It's the family business, hitting home runs. See, Miriam and Aaron are the nailers of the ancient world. Don't tell anybody I said this. They said, "Has the Lord spoken only through Moses? Has he not spoken through us as well?" The Lord heard it. Now Moses was a very humble man, more so than any man on earth. When we looked at humility, we saw this. And it's the notion of humble leadership, isn't it? Servant leadership. You have to be small, make yourself small so that you can serve something large. Humility, as we pointed out, doesn't mean your self-abasement, self-belittlement. It just means the recognition that this isn't all about you. This is about your vocation. And if you do your vocation, you're strong, you're big, but you're only big insofar as you're serving something big. Now Moses was a very, very humble man, more so than any man on earth. Suddenly the Lord called to Moses, Aaron, and Miriam, "Come out, you three, to the tent of meeting." So the three of them went out. The Lord came down in a pillar of cloud, stopped at the entrance of the tent, and called out, "Aaron and Miriam," the two of them came and said, "Hear these my words. When a prophet of the Lord arises among you, I make myself known to him in a vision. I speak with him in a dream." Indirectly, so to speak. Or there's an admixture of the words of God and the words of the prophet. Not so with my servant Moses. He is trusted throughout my household. With him I speak mouth to mouth, plainly and not in riddles. And behold, he beholds the likeness of God. Now, a big idea here, right? He, in a way, sees God. Gives a problem to commentators. We see that Moses sees God face to face in a number of places in the 5 books of Moses, as well as nobody can see my face and live. In other words, there are different views in the 5 books of Moses about this. Maimonides, to whom we'll turn in a second, believes this just means intellectual perception, that Moses really understood the mind of God. Or to put it in plainer terms, he saw the truth. If you know that the sum of the angles of any triangle is 180 degrees, it doesn't matter if God showed that to you. That just happens to be true. And to recognize that truth can be understood as seeing the mind of God, seeing God face to face. A nice poetic way of saying, you know and acknowledge the truth. Okay? With him I speak mouth to mouth plainly and not in riddles, and he beholds the likeness of God. How then didn't you shrink from speaking against my servant Moses? So here I just want to point to Maimonides' understanding of just this moment, okay? So what I'm going to be looking at is his so-called introduction to the Pirkei Avot. Is it the Pirkei Avot? Or it may be the can't remember actually. So at the end of a long introduction, Maimonides then delivers his 13 principles of the Jewish faith. Very famous. We sing them when we sing the song, the Yigdal. The Yigdal has 13 verses, each one about one of these principles of the Jewish faith, okay? So, when you have an odd number of items in any list, there's always a middle number. If you have a list of 1, 2, 3, 4, what's the middle number? There isn't one. An even number of items has no middle number. If you have 5 things in a list, you do have an even number, right? 3, 2 before and 2 after. So if you have 13 principles, you have a middle number. That middle number is 7, okay? So it turns out that the 7th principle in Maimonides' 13 principles of Jewish faith happens to be the preeminence of Moses. So in this sense, the middle is kind of a fulcrum on the basis of which the first 6 and the last 6 pivot. Okay? So here Maimonides is pointing to the utter preeminence of Moses in the corpus of the Jewish tradition. And it's the principle on which he has the most to say. So, for example, the 13th principle, the last principle, and as you would expect, it's about life after death, is this. The 13th fundamental principle is resurrection of the dead, which we've already explicated. That's the end of that. And scholars believe that Maimonides is just acknowledging what people believe without himself really believing it. Okay. The 7th principle about Moses is 2 full pages in this Twersky edition. And I want to read some of it. Because Maimonides does pull out what the preeminence of Moses is all about. The 7th fundamental principle is the prophecy of Moses, our teacher. We are to believe that he was the chief of all other prophets before and after him, all of whom were his inferiors. He was the chosen one of all mankind, superior in attaining knowledge of God. So you may remember Plato's philosopher king, the one who is qualified to rule because he knows. Only the philosopher should really rule, because you want somebody who understands to be your the highest political figure. Of course, Plato says that's impossible. Not only don't the philosophers want to rule, but the ignorant aren't qualified. In any event, that's a kind of acme of Plato's whole idea here, that philosopher kings are the only valid rulers. And Maimonides, in a way, is picking this up, right? We are to believe that he was the chief of all other prophets before him and after him, all of whom were his inferiors. He was the chosen one of all mankind, superior in attaining knowledge of God to any other person who ever lived or ever will live. Let's just look for a second here at the very end of Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy 34. When you get the passage, call it out. Deuteronomy 34, verse 10. Sorry?
333.
333?
Yes.
How fortuitous. Never again. You see where we are? 333. 334, verse 10. Never again did there arise in Israel a prophet like Moses, whom the Lord singled out face to face. Now, again, Maimonides' view of this is he had intellectual perception of the mind of God. He knew that the angles of the sum of the angles of every triangle is 180 degrees. That's sort of a trivial example of it. Whom the Lord singled out face to face for the various signs and portents that the Lord sent him to display in the land of Egypt against Pharaoh and all his courtiers and his whole country, and for all the great might and awesome power that Moses displayed before all Israel. The utter preeminence of Moses, part of which is he had this intimacy with God face to face, which is what Numbers chapter 12 says in a different way. It says in 12, mouth to mouth, which has the same form, X to X. But here, the mouth is the primary organ of prophecy, right? So back to Maimonides. He was the chosen one of all mankind, superior in attaining knowledge of God to any other person who ever lived or ever will live. What could that mean? Ever will live. He surpassed the normal human condition and attained the angelic. So let me just digress for a minute about medieval metaphysics, just very briefly. So that the medievals believed that the mind of God is transformed down through the spheres to what is known as the active intellect. The active intellect exists in the sphere of the moon, which is the closest sphere to the earthly domain. And the active intellect, this comes from Aristotle, can either be a mind that received knowledge from God, or the mind of God itself. In any event, the active intellect is like the encyclopedia, which exists somewhere with all knowledge. And it's active in the sense that it is trying to communicate with human beings. And it will be able to communicate with human beings who have their minds developed fully enough, namely their passive intellect. The passive intellect can receive, but it can't make. But it has the capacity. All human beings have a passive intellect, whereas the animals don't. Other animals don't. And therefore, we are capable of receiving what the active intellect is propelling toward us. And therefore, one can say, when we receive the knowledge propelled from the active intellect, which itself is the receptacle for God's mind, knowing all truth, we come to experience the mind of God. We connect to God face to face because we have full knowledge. Okay? He surpassed the normal human condition and attained the angelic. He knew what the angels know in the spheres beyond the sphere of the moon, that sort of thing. There remained no veil he did not rend or penetrate behind, nothing physical to hold him back, no deficiency, great or small, to confuse him. All his powers of sense and fantasy. Fantasy is the imagination. The imagination is the boogeyman of medieval philosophy, because it's the imagination that leads us astray. We create images, we like them, they're powerful, but they very well have nothing to do with the truth. We have to put the imagination aside and try to attain knowledge through reason. The other prophets are experts at the imagination. They speak in images. These are powerful rhetorically, but they may lead us astray. There's nothing so secure as basic intellectual knowledge itself, the model of which is mathematics. I mean, I can write something on the blackboard, but that's not really the truths of mathematics. That's just a picture. No true circle was ever written on a blackboard, right? True circles are the result of a process, and no human being who draws a circle got that exactly right. Okay, so nothing physical to hold him back, no deficiency, great or small, to confuse him. All his powers of sense and fantasy were repressed, and pure reason alone remained. I mean, who is Moses to Maimonides? The greatest political figure who ever lived, and the greatest intellect who ever lived, the philosopher king himself. This is what is meant by saying that he spoke to God without angelic mediation. This is what face-to-face means, according to mine. Moses got the truth of things, just as Jeremiah does on a lower level, because Jeremiah is filled with the powers of the imagination. I should have wished to explicate this mystery from biblical sources, explaining such verses as God spoke to Moses mouth to mouth, Numbers chapter 12. But I see they require a great many preparatory comments about the remarkable existence of angels, which derives from God, and about the powers of the soul. Right? It's hard to get this exactly right and clear. And the discussion would have to be widened to include the prophetic descriptions of God and angels, including the divine dimension, of which even the briefest description would require 100 pages. I've therefore left all these matters to my exegetical book, which is the Guide of the Perplexed. The book on prophecy on which I am working, I don't think he ever finished that book, or to a book I hope someday to write explaining these fundamental principles. And then he goes off on 4 different ways of understanding the distinction between Moses and all other prophets. Okay? So that here we've talked about some of the dilemmas of prophecy, but here we're dealing with its essence, right? The prophets, and especially Moses, know the truth. And that, therefore, in their prophecy, they are telling about what is the case. And therefore, there's great wisdom in what the prophets declare to us, nothing more preeminent than Moses himself. And one implication of this, as we've said over and over again over the years, is that the 5 books of Moses have to be the preeminent, unmatched literature of the Jewish tradition and of any tradition. Why? Because when Moses dies, it's over. That level of cognition and insight will never again arise. Verse 10 of Deuteronomy 34. Never again did there arise in Israel a prophet like Moses. That's a way of doing that. That says right there that what Moses left behind can never be matched. Whom the Lord singled out face to face, and for the various signs and portents that God led him to display. This is rhetoric. Moses is preeminent because Moses knew, and having known, he now has the singular need, really, and right to proclaim it. And to proclaim it in the way in which people can understand it. Through images, right? Through the uses of the imagination with which to appeal to human beings, which by definition can be misleading. Because the images can yield different interpretations. That's the problem with the imagination. But what are you going to do? You're dealing with human beings. So you have to do it. Gary?
You know, this whole interesting discussion raises the idea that in Jeremiah, essence precedes being. But in Moses' case, being preceded essence. Would you agree with that?
Would I agree with that? So Moses' existence precedes essence. In what sense?
Well, let's go back to Jeremiah, because Jeremiah, what we read this morning, is that Jeremiah was selected and consecrated in utero.
Yeah.
You might then take the next step and think, well, if he was consecrated in utero, then perhaps he had the intellect of God placed in him in utero, so that he could then do his job as a prophet. The opposite with Moses. Moses was selected when he was, 75 or 80 years old.
Right.
He had many years to gain wisdom, but he was a shepherd and a father, and he was not oriented in that direction until God selected him.
Yeah.
You follow?
I do.
So it's interesting that Moses would turn out to be the preeminent prophet when Jeremiah was selected in utero.
No, that's a very good point. So, and I have right here, restate the question.
Okay.
Staring at me. So what Gary is saying here is very interesting, is that I made this distinction between essence and existence. And that for Jeremiah, his essence preceded his existence. He never had a period of his life in which his essence was not operative. Whereas for Moses, he had 80 years of life before he was chosen. So if his essence was to be a prophet, his existence preceded his essence. And I think that's a lovely comment. And now let's think about what the implications are. One implication is a question. To what degree did his pre-call prepare him for his vocation? If it's was totally not preparation, then the fact that he lived 80 years doesn't really become germane, because he didn't become who he was until he was called. But if his pre-calling existence did prepare him for his vocation, then in some essential sense, his existence preceded his essence. And I think you pointed to at least one example. He was a shepherd. So Jeremiah was called. Let's think about God here. Why did God call Jeremiah? And I think the answer is because he called him. It could have been anybody. Turned out he got a good guy, but it doesn't look like there was any preparation. Why did God call Moses? Plausibly, because he saw that Moses had a leadership capacity both to care for and care about those whom he was tending. What I need is a shepherd. Just as when he called David, what I need is a shepherd. So that's very good. So God, for 80 years, is looking around for the right person. There's Jim Mezzie's great-great-grandfather, great-great-great-great. Yeah, wonderful guy. But I'm not sure I'm going to call him. So I'm sort of teasing. But he said about Moses, wait a minute. This guy has a qualification. It's like the SATs, Who am I going to take seriously for the admission to whatever? I got to see how they've performed. Thank God that the admissions committee doesn't just close their eyes and pick. Your essence is to be a student at our college. Yeah, but what about your existence? So do you make anything of this? It's a different model. I like that. Wow, I'm going to have to think about that. Jim?
But also Moses' 80 years were not particularly normal years. I mean, look at those 80 years. What happened? He was raised as an Egyptian, so he understood how their system worked. He understood their deities, and in fact was quite influential in their court. And then he becomes aware of what was called slavery at the time, and acknowledges, hey, I'm not really Egyptian, I'm a Hebrew.
There you go.
And all of a sudden, he's got all these attributes.
There you go.
And then he goes to a third dimension with when he becomes the shepherd with the Midianites, which is another society. So now, he didn't just pick somebody that was walking around for 80 years. He picked somebody with a lot of experience. In fact, 3 different distinct societies. And this guy had 80 years of experience of those 3 societies.
Yeah. I really like that a lot. He also engages in 2 altercations. One between a Hebrew and an Egyptian, and he chooses the Hebrew. He's partisan. The second fight is between 2 Hebrews, one of whom did the wrong thing, so that his commitment is both to his people and to justice. That's another qualification. So, very good. We have two different models here of choosing. And in a certain way, that Moses, now Jeremiah does it too, so my point here isn't as strong as it might be, that Moses lived a full life before being called. And part of his dilemma might be, I was doing okay before you called me. Why are you putting me up to all of this? Whereas Jeremiah couldn't very well say that. His life started with his vocation. I like it very much. Lynn?
You had mentioned earlier in the discussion that essence is how we decide or how it's accepted that these prophets knew what they were saying. They were born with this essence. And you did that to differentiate, well, why wasn't Moses, so Moses actually spoke to God. But why did these prophets speak to God? Well, because they were born with the essence to be able to communicate in an interterrestrial way. Whereas Moses actually spoke with God. So in the beginning, you were differentiating Moses being the only person who spoke with God.
Yes.
But what about all these other prophets? Why do we listen to them? And it was because, I don't know who it was who determined this, that they were born with an essence and a purpose.
Yes.
In utero, before their birth.
Right.
So, I think that we're trying to find out why Moses, what we're doing now is trying to find out what Moses, why he got to speak with God, but why did the others?
Why did the others?
We don't know that. We don't know why. We really don't know why. He was chosen. He was the chosen person. What about all the prophets that followed him? They didn't speak to God. They were born with an essence to be able to communicate within them, internally with God. I think that's what you were saying in the beginning, weren't you?
So I'm not sure I understand what you're saying. You're making a distinction between Moses' kind of prophecy and, let's say, Jeremiah's kind of prophecy.
Not the kind of prophecy we're talking about. God spoke with Moses. God did not speak with these other prophets. Why does these other prophets hear God? Because they were born with an essence. That's all I'm saying.
Well, they heard God, but only after they were born.
Yes, right.
Yeah, they heard God.
Yes.
I thought you were making a distinction that I really like, and it may be that I'm making it up.
I think that you said that the belief is that they were born, that before they were born, they had this essence within them.
Right.
And that's how they became prophets.
Yes.
I don't remember.
And Moses was face to face.
Right. And Moses, was the only person who spoke with God and face to face. And then you were just differentiating between Moses and all the other prophets we're talking about.
Yeah. I think let me tell you how I'm reading what you're saying, or at least how I'm putting it together, and tell me if I